Hello. Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. It's either good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. I know for some people it's very early morning. Here in Kampala, it's a nice sunny afternoon. Let me try to put on my video briefly, just so that people can see who they are speaking to. Yeah, so yeah, that's me. Welcome to this webinar, and the purpose of this webinar is to try to explore the importance of broadband connectivity in times of pandemics, and to see how community networks can play a role in connecting the unconnected. We also are trying to explore policy solutions that may need strengthening community networks as alternatives to raw connectivity. We looked at this topic because of the current pandemic we're in, the current situation we are in, and recognize that everything is going digital, and many people, even in urban areas, are still finding a hard time connecting online. So we have a lineup of speakers, and these are all experts in their own authority, in their own status, who have either implemented projects around community, around connectivity, raw connectivity, but also who have run community networks. We also have a policy expert from one of our regulator, from the Uganda Communications Commission, who is the Uganda's telecom regulator. And for those who do not know me, my name's Lilian Naroga, and I'll be your moderator for today. So with that, I would like to quickly just go through the line of speakers we have. We have, and I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, but you will tell us who you prefer to be called. So we have our first speaker will be Massimiliano Stucci, who is the regional, I see him nodding his head, yes, I got that right, who is the regional technical advisor at with the European region at the Internet Society. We have Josephine Milinza, who is the African Regional Coordinator, Community Networks Project at the Association for Progressive Communications. We have Solomon Okot, who runs a community network here in Uganda, Bosco, Uganda. And we have Lilian Achom, who is a founding partner at Access Plus, but also Lilian was an ISOC, rather Internet Society Community Networks Fellow, I think last year. We'll hear more about her experience in promoting community networks and working with women around community networks. We have Stephen Song, who I'm sure many people have really heard that name. He's a founding partner at Village Telco, and he has done lots of things around community networks. We have Carlos Rey Moreno. Carlos, I hope I got your name right, who is the Local Access Policy Regulation Coordinator at Community Networks at APC. And of course, we have engineer Irene Kaggwa Sewankambo, who is the Acting Executive Director at the Uganda Communications Commission, and I'm your moderator. So we have about maybe 50 minutes, if I put it that way, but we have up to 1:30 for this webinar, and each speaker will have about 7 minutes to share with us their experiences, and we'll go into a Q&A after. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Max, I think that's how you prefer to be called, Max, to give us a brief intro about community networks, why they're important to Internet Society and what Internet Society is doing about that. I thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning to everyone, and maybe good evening as well to some of you. My title there is Regional Technical Advisor for Europe at the Internet Society. But what I do most of my time working at ISOC is together with Juan Peirano, who is also here on the call, we are the project leaders for the Community Networks project. So we overlook what we do at a global level as well. What have we been doing? We help also together with our partners. I see names here. I see Carlos, for example, from APC. I see Josephine with APC. We've worked a lot with them to help community networks all around the world. I guess there's also another colleague on the call, that's Michuki, that many of you will know, because he's also like our regional expert in Africa that works with community networks and with internet exchanges. And I mentioned it, not only we work with community networks, but we also help internet exchanges being established and grow. And we also do a lot of policy work, again, together with our partners, with APC, with many other organizations. We can go later into detail about what happened in Uganda, what my colleagues have worked on in Uganda, but let me say we have a series of community networks that we've helped all across the area. There's, for example, Bosco is one of them, and we keep doing a lot of this work every single day. So we're really busy now, especially in this period, in helping where the need arises. I can tell you what also we have been doing for comparison in Europe, in certain areas of Europe. There are similar help, direct help that we've provided in all the other regions, in North America and South America. And you can read a lot about it on our blogs and the material that we propose. So I don't want to tell that much more now, but I'll leave it for the discussion later on. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Max. I'm trying to get my video back, but I guess I'll leave it at that. So we're happy to hear that we have the Africa ISOC team on present as well, and also we're happy to hear the amazing work that the Internet Society is doing in regard to assisting various community networks in Africa, including Uganda. I would like right now to invite our next speaker, Josephine, to give us an insight on the work that World APC has been doing around community networks, but also to share with us some experiences in how community networks can be of help in times of, like these crises where access to information is important. But again, we have a shortfall, of information, because many people still cannot access this vital information that is being shared. So Josephine, the floor is yours. I believe you do have a presentation, some sort of slide. Let's try to pull it. Josephine, the floor is yours. You could just give a quick intro about yourself as we get your presentation up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lillian, for the invitation. And Sorry. Thank you, Lillian, for the invitation. I'd like to thank the ISOC chapter in Uganda for this opportunity to come and be part of the call. As introduced, I'm Josephine Miliza, and currently the regional coordinator for Africa's working with APC LockNet, which is the Community Networks Project. The project looks at supporting community networks and other community-based initiatives in globally. Currently, we are implementing the project in 3 regions, which is Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And happy to have my colleague Steve and Carlos joining the call as well. So last year, when we started the project in Africa, Uganda is one of the countries that we have worked with, and also happy that Bosco will be presenting the work that they do and the support that they're providing to the community. And our work has mostly revolved around supporting community networks to be able to scale and also become sustainable. And this is mostly through small grant support, peer learning and capacity building, as well as policy advocacy. So helping to create an ecosystem in the an enabling ecosystem in the policy and regulatory environments, which I believe Carlos should be talking about. I decided to have my presentation revolve around why communities are important in the telecommunication space. And one thing that we have learned, I think, from COVID is that the world can actually shut down, cities can shut down, and at the end of the day, people will just remain with their neighborhoods and their towns. And so in most of the cases where services like telecommunications are centralized in terms of capacity, also in terms of access, it becomes very challenging, especially to rural communities. So community networks, for those who don't know about community networks, they are infrastructure deployed and operated by community members. And in most African countries where they exist to support sometimes already existing activities, such as microfinance, digital literacy training. And thus, they not only contribute to access, but also contribute to the social and to the local ecosystems. Okay, let me just, yeah, so I'm on that slide, which is, yes, slide number 1. So the first aspect of community networks is that in different areas, they take different forms. And this is actually like when it comes to the legal basis. And some communities are started by cooperatives, others are started by non-for-profit organization or community-based organization. But the key element is that there's active involvement of the local community members in different aspects of the community. And sometimes this can be governance, operations of the network, or decision making. In terms of digital inclusion, community networks contribute to what we usually term beyond access. Is that first, there's the aspect around the building of the infrastructure. And in different community networks as well, we see them using different connectivity infrastructure. And in most of the community networks in Africa, we find that they mostly used Wi-Fi, which is unlicensed, the unlicensed bands which is their preferred technology. Other countries such as Tanzania have piloted TV white spaces, and we hope that there'll be more supportive policies so that others in the region can also be able to utilize different forms of technologies. And so through this, we find that through provision of this infrastructure, they provide availability of access to connectivity in areas where there's no existing infrastructures, or sometimes it's not just about internet, sometimes it's also about the services that are available. The networks themselves are also designed for inclusion, and that is just when we look at how the different access points are deployed within the communities, they factor in how, for example, the distance between where the people live and where the networks are set up. Then secondly is on the building of local capacity through training, e.g. digital literacy and development. And this actually promotes the adoption of these technologies, because we see that barriers to access in Africa and other developing countries go beyond just access, but also the capacity to be able to utilize the technologies. Then thirdly is the availability through giving of the local relevant platforms, and this contribute to adoption, but also application of ICTs, and in eventuality, this contributes to the economics and social development of the regions, as well as workforce development, education, health, and other areas in the community. So we find that in most cases that actually having communities being involved in the telecommunication sector is very new. And so we see these communities, especially those in rural areas and informal settlements, playing a very passive role, and they are mostly viewed as beneficiaries. But the reality is that in areas where it's not commercially viable, it becomes difficult to design solutions that connect these unconnected populations without involving them. And so community networks are key, have a key role to play in the telecommunication space, because first, they have very vital information that would help not just in terms of policy implementation, policy design, as well as interventions or projects that governments and other players seek to do in these communities. They have the insider information that we need, and at the same time, they are able to do this at a lower cost. They're able to do this at a lower cost instead of maybe hiring consultants to go and do this in the communities. Secondly, from our experience, we've seen that communities actually have key resources, and they're able to mobilize, and not just money, but they're also able to mobilize time. And most of the time, we do not consider these resources as valuable resources from the community. And the notion and the perception usually is that the communities will demand funds from governments or from donors. But through working with the different community networks, we find that if we are able to give them the buy-in and constantly engage with them, then we see constantly engage with them and to show them how valuable the network is, or how the network can contribute to their interest, then they have no problem chipping in, even in areas where, for example, finances fall short, or giving of their time to contribute to the growth of the network. Some examples are this. Some of the examples that we have seen is that community members host masts and equipment at no cost, and also they ensure the safety of the community networks. Lastly, I'd just like to share a bit about how we can invest in the communities. And so the reality is that it takes time to be able to get a community to run and operate a network. But this is a much needed investment if we are to achieve universal access. So what does this investment looks like? First, thinking about supporting the formation of community-based organizations and cooperatives through simplification of the application processes. So we find that when it comes to the telecommunication space, most of the time the required licensing is located in the capital. And so this information is not very available to those who live in rural areas. They have to travel long distances to be able to achieve this. Secondly, is actively involving community members, champions, and members who understand the local perspectives in policy formulation and implementation. We have seen this divide, for example, in Kenya, when this came up, when the shutdown happened, it was just around the time when we were supposed to have a public consultation on TV white spaces. And so those who maybe would have wanted to travel from other parts of the country to contribute to the conversation were not able to unless they had access to the internet. So connectivity at community level will be able to also promote and ensure that we are leaving no one behind, not just in the access of the internet, but also in getting their perspectives on what they need at community level. As stakeholders, I think it's also important that we promote mechanisms that enable peer-to-peer learning opportunities that facilitate knowledge exchanges among community networks. As LockNet, we experienced this last year when we had Bosco Uganda visit Zenzeleni, which is a community network in South Africa, and sharing the experiences about solar, implementing of solar energy, and other aspects of the community network, just helping the different community networks sort of resolve the challenges that they were facing. On the other hand, Bosco also learned from Zenzeleni how to implement platforms such as monitoring platforms for their networks and billing platforms, which Zenzeleni has implemented very well. So we see the ability for communities to learn at a peer-to-peer level. It promotes the adoption of best practices because who knows better than the person who has been doing it. Lastly, is the establishment and support of training programs that go beyond digital literacy. When you go around, you'll find most of the initiatives just focus on computer packages, especially in the rural areas. And as community networks, as these networks are in the community, we see a potential for them, as some are already doing this, to actually help build capacity for youth. So the challenge always has been the financial aspects to it, but as well expertise. But if well supported, I think they can play a very critical role in promoting the building, in promoting access to education, or just hands-on experience in terms of building networks, building applications that are relevant to the community as well. And this will help solve one of the biggest challenges that Africa has, which is rural to urban migration, especially for the youth. So in summary is that I believe that community networks and grassroots communities are able to contribute greatly to achieving universal access for all, and we need all hands on deck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. And yes, like you've summarized it all, that really community networks can play a huge role in bringing everyone connected, and we need all hands on deck. What I learned I had was, how Kenya has been able to leverage on some of the projects that you've run there, and how people have been able to, tap into that resource during this all, lockdown, or we experiencing as not just as a continent or a region, but as a globe. But yeah, so it's really been nice hearing those experiences. With that, I would like to, I know you've mentioned two names so far. You've mentioned Bosco, and I would like to assume that we do have Bosco online, representative from Bosco, and this is Solomon Okot. You've also mentioned Carlos. Carlos will also be sharing some experiences in some of the policy options that have been explored in, having running successful CNNs. And of course, you mentioned One Community Networks in Zelani in South Africa. So yes, we are happy to hear more about these the experiences of these two, model community networks that we have in the region. So Bosco, are you online? If you're online, the floor is yours. Let's see. Solomon? Yes, Solomon, your hand is up. Please, you've been unmuted. You can please take the floor to share about what Bosco Uganda has, how it has been helping communities in Uganda in the current times we are facing. So the floor is yours. Solomon, the floor is yours. And you've been unmuted. Okay. Seems we have some technical problem there. We can't seem to hear anything from Solomon. Perhaps as we get to hear from Solomon, I would like to maybe have Lillian Achom.
Okay.
Yeah, Lillian, you can share. You can go on with your presentation, and Solomon will be speaking after you. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lillian. Yes, we are both Lillian. Thank you very much, Lillian. And thank you everyone for joining on the call. And I also want to take this, first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank the team that has been able to put all this through the leadership of Lillian, and then Sarah Kided and Cliff, who are also on the call. They've been organizing this. My presentation is a brief one. It's a continuation of what Josephine has really been speaking about. So I'll be very brief, and I'll be speaking mainly on the gender aspect, a gender-sensitive approach to establishing community networks, why it is very important, why we should put this into consideration. So, yes, one is we have to, we recognize the efforts, or the leadership roles that women play, both at community and family levels. So first, when we go to the communities, most of the communities in most countries have been able, at least I got the opportunity to work with women groups in different countries from North, West, South, and East Africa. And the one thing is that stands out is that there are so many organized business groups and cooperatives, most of which are organized and managed by women, mainly probably because the women really have the responsibility to look after their families, to provide for their families. So they are involved in so many businesses, in farming or just any other kind of businesses. So they come together to because they believe when they come together, they can make profits or be strong, basically. So CNs could, establishing CNs could be focusing around these women, because eventually it would, the CNs could then be could boost their businesses. For instance, if in Senegal, one of the photos that you're seeing here, there are over 50 women groups, and each women group has approximately 30 to 50 members, and they are both dealing in different activities. So to me, I see that if CNs could capitalize on this and make sure that they work with these women groups to bring them online, to bring their products online, then this could eventually, other than actually, apart from boosting the businesses through internet connectivity, it is also a way of sustaining. They would contribute to sustainability of the existing, of the CNs. Yes, so that is one of them, but also, as we establish these community networks in the communities, it would be very important to make sure that the women and the young girls, university graduates, children are also part of this, of the entire process of establishing the community networks, because then in the process, they better understand their roles and they better understand the purpose, the value of these facilities. And that way they also contribute to the sustainability, because sustainability really, to me, revolves around the people around it. You know, the more people you have, the more reason for them to come and utilize the resources, you know, the better for the CNs. So we would really encourage the students, parents, and women to also be a part of the establishment and then the management of these facilities, and the use, and not just the use, because most of the CNs, I think, mainly register these ladies as users of these facilities, but they can actually contribute be good leaders in the management of the facilities, and also contribute in the establishment. The other thing is, the other point I wanted to talk about, especially during this COVID situation, you find that most of the community network centers or community networks do not really cover a wide radius. So as such, you find that during such a time where movements are limited, and then people are avoiding crowded places, you find that nobody is willing to really go to, or they cannot go to really use the internet that is available at the facilities. So ensuring that as we work towards connecting these people, we aim at making sure that the internet connectivity reaches the households, such that even in their houses, when everybody is locked up in their houses, at least the majority of them are able to access these facilities, the internet, and be able to communicate or access information that has been passing around about, you know, COVID and all that, something that has not, that many, I'm sure, have not been been able to access. For instance, in Morocco, one of the sites that we had in Morocco, one of them, there are about 20 households that were able to access internet even during this time. So coverage could be something that is important that we could also look at. And then the other thing is acceptance. And by this is from this is in addition to what Josephine mentioned about as well. But there is still a lot of myths and misinformation and different beliefs among the communities about technology. So I see community networks as entry points for digital literacy programs as an approach to demystify technology at grassroots levels, and especially to the women, because and the parents, because the thing is, if the parents, the mother and the father, do not believe in technology, then they'll be the ones to actually influence the children, and somehow this is contributing to the low use of technology in the rurals. But I see community networks as an entry point to demystify this information and clarify everything to these people. And then we shall see more people joining because they've understood what technology is, and they know that there's really nothing wrong, and that it's to their advantage. So basically, that is really what I had to share. In conclusion, I just want to say that to me, as we think of establishing community networks in our different communities, really let's try to ensure that the women, the girls, are part of the establishment, right from including the technical roles, from the establishment to the management and the youth. And to me, I believe that these women groups, the cooperatives, if they get to understand the benefits of internet, the benefits of these community networks, then it is actually eventually, in the long run, it might contribute to the sustainability of community networks in one way or another. Yes, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Lillian. And I think you've shared quite some insightful points on how women-led initiatives can help in curbing this whole connectivity gap we experience in areas. And I liked the point that you highlighted about misinformation about connectivity, as many of us have had around the misinformation around 5G and 5G and how it's, for some reason, someone came up with a theory that it contributed to the the COVID-19 disease. So I think that's a good point that we can, try to preach more about how, community networks and having people to bring in connectivity close to them can lead towards, fighting some of this misinformation. Yes, in the interest of time, I would like to welcome Solomon. If Solomon, you can speak right now. Are you able to speak? Because we could not hear anything you are saying. So Solomon, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Solomon? Okay, we don't know what's happening to Solomon, but yeah, in the interest of time, I guess. Okay, Solomon, let's try to get. Victor, I would need some assistance to have, I think, Solomon unmuted. All in, where do we go? Solomon, are you logged in as you? Victor, there's a user Technopavois3. Could you assist in unmuting them, please? I think Solomon is that user. I can't seem to find that user though. Okay. Okay, as we get around the technical issue of having Solomon, I would like to perhaps bring, okay. Okay, Solomon, you can please speak, and let's try to just limit your intervention to 7 minutes because I'm seeing we are.
Hello.
Yes, please, Solomon, you can continue. You have about 7 minutes to share with us how Bosco.
Yes, sorry about and sorry about the problem with my mic on the laptop. I'm just going to run on quickly on Bosco Uganda. Bosco
Okay.
Uganda is a non-profit organization based in northern Uganda, and we are running a community network alongside other projects. It started in 2008 as a response to the connectivity challenge that we had during the LRA war, and it's continuing up to date. And the vision of Bosco is open and peaceful rural communities ready to face the challenges of globalized centuries of the 21st. And the mission is to provide innovative communication to the rural communities through solution of collaborative web-based approach to foster economic development, peace building in northern Uganda. That is just a brief about Bosco Uganda. Going into our approach, Bosco Uganda works in about 4 or 5 thematic areas. One is community network. The second one is entrepreneurship and mentorship program. Then the third one is capacity development. Then the fourth one is clean and renewable energy. And the last one is research and development. The approach of Bosco Uganda is to work with community. How do we do this? To start a community network, you need the communities that will be supporting the operation of community network, and they will act also as the users of the network. But on top of that, you need support from the different stakeholders in the communities. For example, we have schools, we have church institution, we have the local government, and we have other institutions like the non-governmental organization, CBO, and cultural leaders. All those people needs to be involved in the community network build up. Now, for the first engagement of Bosco Uganda works with communities which are already having some groups that can guide and foster the technology within the community. And the first target group is the youth, and the second target group is the women, and the third one now goes to, like the third beneficiaries are the general communities. Why we chose the youth? Because they are very active in adapting to technologies, and it's them who will grow up to make sure that the rest of the communities get into the technology, because as you know, community networks is mostly voluntary basis, and Bosco as a community network has a very limited number of staff. So you will need youth that will be trained, and they will act as an eye of Bosco Uganda to build the capacity and run the network within the community. And then, of course, culturally, we know that women are the people who are having most of the household duties, and also they are the one who take care of home. So you need to involve them to allow the girl child to access these centers. They are the one that can talk to the men to understand, because in African society, sometimes if a youth like a girl speaks to the dad about something, might be difficult for the dad to accept, but the mother can accept. So our approach is to identify youth group which are active doing some activities already within the different communities, and then we bring in the community network as an addition to the activities that they are doing. But Bosco goes deep into working with communities. For example, the strategic plan of Bosco Uganda, we make always for 5 years. We make sure that we involve representative from all these community centers into the strategic plan, so that we get to know how Bosco is performing, what the community wants Bosco to improve, what they don't like about the community network, what are the services that they feel should be added so that they benefit more and becomes more relevant to them. So this goes deeper. For community network to run, the community has to understand the strategic plan of the community network so that they embrace and own it. So that is how the base of collaboration with the community starts. Now, after all this, Bosco Uganda do an assessment of the infrastructure within the community. Now, this comes from the strategic plan that community has to contribute. In this contribution, communities normally give in the housing for the equipment where this installation will be done. They participate sometimes in even building the towers together with the Bosco technician and maybe the contractor. This makes community to own this project. Now, leaving about the building up, since I have limited time, uh, with this, you find that Bosco Uganda carries out different activities. Apart from just providing wireless connection to the communities, the entrepreneurship bit is to foster socio-economic development so that the e-learning can transform into the e-economic, like the e-commerce. People should be able to transact from wherever they are. For example, during this COVID period, Bosco has become more relevant because we have seen the uptake of internet increase so highly. And the good thing with the wireless technology is you don't need to be like in the same in the same area. Someone can be at a distance of 5 meters, 10 meters, and can still access. So we find that communities were able to get information in time, and people were able to transact online. Although the challenge became that the part of the e-learning, especially the curriculum being circulated by the ministry, due to what Lillian and Josephine said, the limited infrastructure in all the areas. So only the people who are close to the center where Bosco Uganda operates, because we have 55 points of presence. That one is youth community centers and church institutions and schools. But we have also other organizations which are connected to Bosco Uganda's network, which were doing their work from home online. But looking at the school curriculum that was circulated, you find that most parents come to the center with to ask for this youth to support them in downloading this curriculum, help them in printing. That is where we learned that our approach also worked a bit, because now the computers are in these centers, printers are in these centers, and you have the internet at these centers. So while all these other secretarial bureaus in town and other centers were closed, at least the youth were able to print this homework and give it to the different parents within their locality. But now the people who are out of reach within these areas, they are suffering because other students, other parents even are not aware that ministry has circulated anything. And they will be shocked that their student or their kids will go back to school and they'll find that other kids were doing assessment. They were reading from home. So this is a challenge that community network can address, because in these communities, not all parents have access to smartphones, and even to this the analog phones. Very few of them have access, leave alone the having access to the device. What about the skills to use this device? It's not there. So this is where, as Bosco Uganda, we are really very strong to see that more community networks are developed so that the hard to reach areas where the big shots in communication arenas left, we, the community network, can fill in and render services that address the need of the community members themselves. We saw our network being used to stream masses in Gulu. The Archbishop every Sunday, his mass is being streamed online using the Bosco network. We have other churches also streaming. Now there's another parish priest in one of the centers in Opet. He's organizing a webinar with the parents and community members around Opet Trading Center to tell them about a business opportunity that is linking them with some sponsor. But the challenge now becomes that all the people within these centers, very few of them can access smartphones, and with the current COVID period, you are not supposed to gather. That means very few people will have access to this opportunity. If you go into issues of communication, we have seen that some of the radio stations were not giving accurate information, and people don't know which place to go to. But if you have internet within the community, people could go straight away to the Ministry of Health website and get the right information from the Ministry of Health, from the Ministry of Works, according to the traffic law. So we have seen this as a very big challenge that can be addressed by community network. But also, if you look at the other bit of the training that Bosco Uganda offers to the community, we just don't give them the community network because they are running a network and they have also other activities to do. We build their capacity in leadership and management training. So issues of bookkeeping, issues of accountability. We also train them on basic maintenance of and troubleshooting of computers, printers, network, and also solar system. But the backbone of community network.
You need to summarize your presentation because we have 3 more speakers and we are running out of time.
I'm actually summarizing. We see that as Bosco Uganda, the best approach for community networks is to embrace the use of solar energy. Because as Bosco Uganda, we have been running, it's first of all very reliable and it's durable, because a battery can run between 6 to 8 years before you replace. And the cost of electricity in Uganda is so high, and the cost of connecting to the grid is so high that community network cannot afford to run. Imagine like Bosco Uganda, we are running 55 centers. If we are to extend electricity and pay bills for all these 55 centers, how much would Bosco be spending? But we do a one-time investment on solar system that you can only maintain. So, and then there's research and development that helps Bosco to look at the new technologies that is coming in the market that can be used to see that community network can run efficiently without a lot of interference and a lot of restrictions in regulations. For example, Bosco Uganda uses 5.8 and 2.4 gigahertz radios, which are freelance radios in Uganda. So these are the kind of things that community network should embrace. And also, as the policy makers, they should give favorable policies to community network so that they operate in the environment without being pushed by these policies that are set mostly dominated by the big companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solomon. You've really shared a lot with a lot of passion. And the most that was very interesting to me, and I'm sure to everyone, is how your center has been able to, assist people during this whole lockdown, and the sharing of learning materials where people could come and access, print, and distribute, the streaming of online church services and that all, and shows that we really need these services. And of course, you've mentioned something about how bringing technology, or rather connectivity, closer to people can help in fighting misinformation, is something that we hope that with the more that we are trying to bring the conversation closer to people, or try to learn what is happening out there, we'll get more such networks to assist in this whole connectivity challenge. So thank you so much, Solomon. And without much ado, I would like to welcome Carlos to share some of policy options to community networks, and whether there are any lessons learned, and what kind of policies do we need in having successful CNAs. And Carlos, the floor is yours. Feel free to use the video if you wish to.
Okay, sure. I can put my video on if you want. Thank you, Lillian, and thank you everyone for organizing this. It's always super hard to come after Solomon and Lillian and because they do such a good job. I'm gonna try to explain a bit so I work for the Association for Progressive Communications, and the Association for Progressive Communications is one of the organizational members at Senseleni Networks. So I represent APC on the board of Senseleni, which I also help founding. So I'm going to try to talk about the interactions in between community networks and the South African licensing framework, and talking about the case of Senseleni Networks. So it could, in case it could help, I know we have a representative from the UCC here, and to bring a bit the conversation around some of the policy issues that Solomon was talking about towards the end. So I'm going to introduce briefly Senseleni. Senseleni is a set of organizations, the non-for-profit, the one I represent on its board is a non-for-profit organization that, let's say, incubates or provides services to telecommunication cooperatives and other small internet service providers. Among those cooperatives and providers, there are two at the moment. There will be more Senseleni network cooperatives. There is one in a village called Situlele, another one in a village called Mankosi. This is on the Eastern Cape in South Africa, and as well as other small operators that also receive services from Senseleni networks. So when we talk about Senseleni networks, we talk about the MPC that provide services to other cooperatives and small operators that in turn provide services to the users and to the end clients. And in particular, in the case of these two cooperatives, they are using Wi-Fi infrastructure, very similar to what Solomon was describing, and they share a backbone that goes all the way from a point of presence in Umtata, which is the closest town, to the villages where they are. And in between the two villages, we are talking around 100 hotspots in between the two of them. Not only there are hotspots for the public, but there are anchor tenants that are provided services via fixed Wi-Fi services. There has been a very interesting case with COVID, both around the increase of traffic that has been seen everywhere else, and especially with the return of students or homeschooling, as well as some of the people living in urban areas going back to the villages where they live. And the infrastructure has been able to cope with it, but there has been also an increase of the selling of the voucher, a significant increase based on people who have the devices and have the skills to use the network more broadly. Those I saw some of the questions for Solomon. In the case of Senseleni, those vouchers are around $2 a month, and then you need to buy them every month. And in terms of the business model, there is a component of that that goes for the cooperative and the technicians and all the operational expenses, as well as paying for the internet backhaul, as well as for the resellers. The resellers of the vouchers, they get 10% of the vouchers that are sold. Only on the last month, there has been around 300 vouchers sold in between the two villages, and there has been a significant, as I said, well, today I was talking to some of the operational team, and they told me that another request of another 100 vouchers has been requested. So I was talking about the business. I'm not going to talk about the social component and the community involvement. I think is relatively similar to Bosco, and I want to move more towards the policy. What does it mean? All these things that I was mentioning for, or how it intersects on the regulatory framework. For COVID, it has been also both the non-for-profit and the cooperatives. They have been endorsed by ICASA, the South African regulator. In ICASA, there is a framework by which you require a license to deploy infrastructure and make capacity available on it, and you require a license to provide services with that capacity. In the case of the service providers, they do have exemptions because there is a provision for that in the framework. For the infrastructure based on being a private network and on the services based on being non-for-profit cooperatives. That means they can provide commercial services, but all the revenue, all the profit is reinvested on the goals of the community, of the cooperative, that are very much along the lines of the social development and community development that Solomon was talking about. But being legal has had several implications. One, especially during the COVID period, and being telecommunications have been deemed by the by the government of South Africa, a critical service, Senseleni staff was able to keep on maintaining and expanding the infrastructure during the lockdown because that was a requirement, being able to show your license to the police, being able to move around. It has been also possible to buy bulk, to enter into a commercial agreement with a wholesaler, which has been critical in terms of getting cheap backhaul or upstream service. And it has also been possible to resell to other small operators in Umtata because the NPC, in this case, the non-for-profit company, has a reselling license that is also non-for-profit, which means that it can resell internet in the point of presence in the fiber, where it interconnects with the wholesaler. But it also has meant that with these licenses, exemptions, it has been able to get its foot on the ground, its business model running, without having to pay fees and having to deal with compliance. At the moment, there is a discussion internal to Senseleni about getting into obtaining a license for at least the infrastructure, because we are stretching, it's been stretched a bit, the definition of private network, And but getting into a license would means a significant amount of compliance, but at the same time being able to get more clients in places where that are still in rural areas that might not be considered private to the community where the cooperative started. So it has other implications around the contribution to the Universal Service and Access Fund on the con side of things, but at the same time being able to receive funds from the Universal Service and Access Fund. So or being able to apply for them at the least. So it's a bit of a pros and cons. Also, on the spectrum side of things, Senseleni has been using Wi-Fi, which is a band that doesn't require, is also license exempt in the case of South Africa if you use type approved equipment, and that's been okay for now, but it has many limitations. The main one being is you need to design the network in a case-by-case basis, in a community-by-community basis. Senseleni has been advocating quite a lot to get access to the international mobile telephony spectrum that is idle and proven to be idle in rural South Africa without success to date, because there is no provisions, or the provisions at the moment with the spectrum that has been allocated is that the operators who have been assigned that the spectrum have everything to say with regards whether they share it or not. And I think with the new licenses that come in South Africa, when new spectrum, international mobile telephony spectrum is made available, I hope, and that's all the advocacy that both APC and Senseleni are doing, some of that spectrum would be available for community networks in rural areas because of the handsets issues that Solomon was talking about, but also because how easy it would be to price and to know how much to design, to know how much it costs, to know how much to ask the communities to contribute to know how much to ask potential funders to contribute to. What Senseleni has proven is with some funds from international donors as well as public funding from research institutions and the science and technology department, is that once you cover the capital expenditure, the operational expenditure is not only recovered by the users, but that you can also generate some sort of local economy to contribute to what's happening in the community. So yeah, the last part I wanted to touch upon is related to something that Solomon also mentioned, that is the lack of access to official information, trustworthy information in local languages and that apply to the rural context. That hasn't been the case in most of the public information having made available, and Senseleni has made a public notice board which has been 0 rated in all the hotspots for the members of those 2 villages to actually access all that contextualized public official information from the ministries. So yeah, I wanted to touch just slightly before I conclude on the Ugandan Communications Commission. Well, for now, a blog post. I hope it becomes, we are able to read the regulations soon, where we can see that in Uganda there is something unique in Africa so far, that is the authorization for a communal license that would be the first step, or I understand, I really would like to hear more from the UCC representative here, would be a great first step into the fitting of community networks in Uganda in order to establish some of the other activities that are required to get wholesale, to get access to the USF, to be compliant, so on and so forth. So I think Uganda has made a very bold step, which is unique in the region, and I think it's going to help us with the advocacy in other countries. And I really want to know more on how that's going to be operationalized. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I think you've set the scene for the next 2 speakers. You've shared quite a lot on the licensing regimes and also probably what can be done, learning from what, say, what has been done in South Africa, and also highlighting, what the most interesting case for Uganda. We always have a saying here back home that Uganda, we are good at, setting examples and best practices, especially when it comes to the telecom industry. So I'm very positive that we'll we'll learn more from what UCC has to share. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights. Next up, I would like to welcome Stephen Song to share with us. We've heard so much about infrastructure challenges, connectivity issues from the previous speakers, especially the ones that are really having active community networks. So Steve will be sharing with us what role telecom operators can play in enhancing the work of community networks. And with this, we'll be looking mainly at ISPs, fiber optic networks, and NRNs. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I think that my apologies. I think that the interesting observation for me in so far in listening to these interventions is the success of community networks has largely been in spite of an enabling environment for them. They are like flowers that have sprouted up among the cracks in the concrete because they needed to, because they had to burst into life. And what we are beginning to see now is the emergence of enabling regulation to empower them. And I think it's interesting to see that in the context of growing infrastructure around the region, because there are critical bottlenecks that are going to limit the growth of community networks. And I'll touch on a couple of them. One is access to backhaul. A second is access to wireless technologies. And a third is access to funding and subsidies to be able to grow. And backhaul may be, in fact, the biggest of those issues, simply because increasing demand for broadband is increasing the relevance of the backhaul networks as a bottleneck. And I think this video that we are having today is a great example of the fact that we no longer survive on small amounts of bandwidth that can serve email and messaging, but we actually need broadband to be able to have events like this and to be inclusive about events like this. So when I think of the success of an organization like Bosco that has survived for, I think, 8 years now, it is remarkable that they have done so in the environment that they are, in terms of being able to purchase access to the backhaul networks. But this is a critical bottleneck now, because as a small organization, they don't have much bargaining power with the network providers, and you have a number of options in terms of backhaul from north to south. Private operators, the state NETA network, but the pricing for a small organization remains a barrier. And I wonder if there's an opportunity there to, especially in the light of these new licenses for community-owned networks, to create a framework where nonprofit broadband providers gain access to some kind of preferential rate to be able to access backhaul networks. And this may apply to community networks, but also to national research and education networks, which are, maybe the largest community network in the country, in that they are not profit seeking. So doing that in a way that is not going to interfere with the private sector in the market, but recognizes the critical role that education networks and community networks play in access. A second piece there then is also the issue of access to wireless spectrum. Wi-Fi has been done amazing things in terms of allowing people to provide connectivity at in very, very affordable ways that hasn't been possible before. But it is limited in terms of its power output, in terms of its reach. And we are beginning to see the emergence of low-cost LTE technologies that could be put into use, but we need an enabling framework to allow that to happen. And this doesn't have to be done in a way that's adversarial with the private sector, but it could actually be in a way that is complementary. So, for instance, we've seen in other countries in the Middle East around spectrum assignments that that the private sector are able to gain credits or rebates on what they paid for spectrum when they deliver service into rural areas. Perhaps that could be opened up to community networks to access the same spectrum and provide give the private sector operators also a rebate for having allowed access to that spectrum. And finally, in subsidies, I think I saw yesterday the UCC issued or is in the process of issuing a tender for providing Wi-Fi access at the borders, and that is open to holders of a public service provider license. It would be great to see have the opportunity for community networks to be able to tender for those kinds of services, because if in the north an organization like Bosco understands its environment well and understands sustainability because in that region, because they are close to the issues there. And I think what we've seen in community networks elsewhere in the world is that those community networks that have been able to access broadband subsidies directed at the private sector have also thrived. And the example I'm thinking of there is broadband for the rural north in Northern England. So my last point, because I realize we're short on time, and is that critical to having these conversations about access to backhaul networks, about access to wireless technologies, is the transparency. And there are great examples of transparency. The NITA network has consistently published its network as it's grown, and plans have been available to the public. Yet Facebook, that have invested in the Northwest in Uganda, I have tried fruitlessly to have a simple map of that network. It's not made public. We need public information about private networks simply because this infrastructure is too valuable not to have a public discussion about it. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. And the one thing that I've really picked out is the transparency. And I know you've set the scene for the next speaker, but the issue of transparency in infrastructure deployment is really key, because once the community, I'm not even just talking about rural community, but once the community cannot know where to find the resources, then we may have a problem in trying to expand this whole connectivity issue or topic that we are covering. So thank you so much, Steve, for highlighting that. So without much further ado, I know we have 10 minutes, but we can stretch it to another 15 minutes for the Q&A. I'd like to welcome our last speaker, Engineer Irene Kaggwa Sewankambo, the ED of the Uganda Communications Commission, to give us a brief into, the current, regulation framework for Uganda and how supportive or unsupportive it is of this whole agenda that we are trying to push for, expounding connectivity to the far-reach areas. So Irene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lillian, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, panelists, depending on where you're located. Thank you very much, Lillian, for the invitation to be a part of this webinar, and always a pleasure to work with you, as always. Of course, this is a subject very dear to me because of my history with ensuring inclusiveness of communication, but without much ado, I'll just dive right into it and share with you what we're doing from the UCC angle. In respect to the licensing, yes, Steve just spoke about issues of credit for private sector or licensed operators going into providing services in the rural areas and maybe extending this to community networks. Yes, we also have, within our licensing regime, we do have obligations for providing access to the rural areas because we have a multi-pronged approach to our universal service objective. So we have the coverage obligations that are given to the operators by virtue of their licensing. Then we also push for infrastructure sharing. We, as you're aware, the national broadband policy provided for national roaming, and this is something we're in the process of developing guidance for to make sure we realize it, but not just that. Within our licensing framework, we also have provision for infrastructure-only providers, and this has been very instrumental in facilitating infrastructure sharing among operators. So today, most of the operators, actually almost all of them, no longer bother with setting up their own sites for the base stations and instead lease from tower companies that are into the business of providing such co-location and infrastructure sharing services. We also, of course, have, as mentioned by Steve, we've introduced a communal access license. And as listening to many of the previous speakers and remembering a discussion that has been going on among many of the African regulators, among ourselves, in terms of defining what would qualify as a community network within the licensing regime. And in our case, what we're looking at, of course, is that it is a shared network or shared telecommunication system. It has to be owned by that community and really running for the benefit of that community. So it's providing services to that community. It has been established for their needs rather than having a third party come in to provide the services to them. We're also technology neutral in our approach to the provision of services by the different individuals and seek to encourage this in the various frameworks, including our radio spectrum authorizations. We have the unlicensed bands that Solomon already spoke to, that they're using the ISM bands of the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz that are common for most unlicensed spectrum. And then last year, we also issued our framework on terms that provides for the use of TV white space in Uganda. We know that there's been a key interest on this. And so last year we did put out provisions to allow those interested to be able to use it within Uganda. We also have the Rural Communications Development Fund, which is one of our most prized programs as a commission. And this looks at both the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, we offer subsidies to operators to be able to, we all recognize the challenges of rural areas, and I've spoken about the coverage obligations that are given, but we recognize that there are those areas where even the coverage obligations won't make them, because for one reason or another, they are not viable, either because of the terrain or the population density in the area, or the per capita income of the people in that area. So to facilitate and ensure that even those persons are not left behind, we put forward subsidies so that persons go and provide services in the areas. Steve was speaking about other persons being allowed to compete for these grants, and I'll just speak to that briefly. We also have public facilities that we set up because we recognize that not everybody will be able to afford their own individual subscription or individual service. So we are setting up public Wi-Fi's. Yes, Steve has spoken to some of those, but we're also working with the post offices so that those are access points, and then the public libraries across the country, and so that persons can also go there to access services. On the demand side, of course, a key issue we've noted, and some of the other previous speakers have spoken to this, is the issue of awareness and skilling. I always keep arguing that unlike a bicycle, technology is not as obvious to everybody. It creates a fear of spoiling it, so persons are less eager to take it up and need some form of encouragement and some level of digital skilling to be able to overcome that initial fear. And in the awareness, it's really about overcoming and appreciating not just that ICT is there as a tool or as a communication tool, but what else? How can they make it relevant? How can it be made relevant into their lives, so that this drives up the demand side of it. In our skilling programs, we take due cognizance of disadvantaged groups. So we do specialist programs for women, for youth, PW, persons with disabilities. We started recently one for informal sector in SMEs. We've done also some for agriculture, to make sure that we target the different parties in their groups and help them appreciate the value of ICTs in their lives. We also look at developing more locally relevant applications of these technologies in people's lives. So we support interventions that create, for example, market prices or input information to agriculturalists, so that we drive up the usage of these. We also do research. It is very important to us that we don't sit in our offices in Kampala and assume. In our case, we are happy that we now also have 4 regional offices. We have one in Mbarara, looking at the Western region. We have one in Masindi, Gulu, and Mbale. But we don't want to sit in our offices and assume we know what people want, or we know what are the challenges out there. So we do research to help us not only know the trends elsewhere, but locally what is happening on the ground, so that whatever interventions we make are really informed by evidence or information on the reality. I mentioned the competitive grant program. It really depends on what the particular program is targeting to intervene. Because, for example, if we're doing an agricultural content dissemination platform, we're not going to put it out to the operators, for example. So the target or the eligibility criteria is really dependent on the particular project at hand. And of course, being that the operators are the ones that finance the Rural Communications Development Fund in terms of their levy, we always find incentive for them to give back to them, because many times they feel like you take from them and they don't. If it's a levy, it should be plowed back, and it also incentivizes them to compete favorably to address this. In terms of transparency to infrastructure that was mentioned, I just thought I'd pick that up from the discussions that have just been made. Yes, normally that's the desirable, but we also have to be cognizant of the critical infrastructure protection that we have a need for today. So we have a platform that we have set up where, for example, persons who are engaged in road works or any civil construction works are able to go online and get information on where infrastructure is, so that they don't damage the infrastructure and cause unnecessary outages or degradation to quality of service. And we are escalating this or developing this further to facilitate exchange, to reduce duplication among operators. But if we talk about having this public to everybody, not everybody has the right agenda. So how do you balance information access vis-a-vis the need to actually protect the critical infrastructure? So again, in terms of access to such information, it needs some level of regulation and control in terms of the access to it. And for now, we are still evolving as a sector. Yes, we are now pushing for sharing of information. Even at that level, that has been a challenge. It's not been easy to get to a level where competitors can share information on infrastructure. So when you try to open it up, there is some sensitivity. But in terms of consolidated information, that is normally available. And I'm surprised Steve keeps saying he still hasn't gotten hold of that map, because that map is publicly available. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Irene, for sharing those insights on what UCC is doing. Of course, when I say UCC is more what the government of Uganda is doing to expand connectivity to the rural areas. And I think most of what you've given us answers some of the questions that we've been having, especially about policy discussions. I mean, about policy. I had a question, are there any policy issues regarding setup of community networks? And I think you've talked about that, especially in the current telecom regime. And of course, someone was asking, and which ministry or government entity is responsible? So you've responded to that. You've responded to the issues of, the infrastructure challenges and, what government is doing and what the private sector can do to enable that. So I think you've responded to the policy questions, and we thank you so much for, leading the drive to, connecting the unconnected with all the initiatives that you are, overseeing. So in the interest of time, I know this meeting was supposed to end 4 minutes ago. We have some questions though in the chat that may need some responses, and some of these were directed to Solomon, but I think they have been responded to on chat. There was a question on how do you make sustainability of internet services operation to the community. I think this has been responded to. So if anyone will give it some 5 minutes, if anyone has any question that has not been responded to. There's the issue of gender statistics of community network access and use in Uganda. I'm not so sure the statistics are there, but Solomon or anyone can try to address that. If that information is there, you can provide it in chat. So yes, I don't know if any of our speakers have any question to respond to. Feel free to unmute and speak to any of the questions that have been flowing on the chat. But I think most of them have been responded to. Okay, Sarah, you're unable to raise your hand. Can you speak for 1 minute or so?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry, this is Sarah for the record. I have a question to Engineer Irene Kaggwa regarding the call for Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi hotspots. you have already talked about the communal licensing, but one of the requirements is that the applicant needs to hold a public service provider license, which I think is different from the communal one. So I just wanted to find out how community networks can actually benefit from this call. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Do we have any more hands raised? I don't think so. Irene, can you respond to that briefly?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Sarah, for the question, and thank you for the interest shown. This particular call, though, is targeting PSPs only because of the nature of how the design is being looked at in terms of what we seek to provide and the requirements therein. So for now, this particular one was targeted to those who have the public service provider licenses.
Thanks, Irene. Barak, you had a question? Okay, Barak is asking how much solar power does a one site take to consume? Could we have respond to that? And we should be finishing at 1:40, so we have 5 minutes to close this up. So I don't know if this is directed to Bosco, Solomon, or Josephine. You could assist. Okay, Bosco. Solomon, if you're online, you could respond to this briefly.
Like 500 watts, like if you're talking about the centers, we normally do like 500 watts.
Okay,
Hello?
Thanks, Bosco. I think that we've, I think that,
but
that has been,
yeah, but also, it also depends on the need for the site, because we have some site with 1.5 kilowatts and we have two sites with 30 kilowatts.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Bosco. Sorry, I don't know, I keep calling you Bosco, but thanks so much, Solomon, for responding to that. I think from Victor Asante, I think the issue of competition, ISNs and ISPs by traditional ISPs, I think that was addressed by Steve, that this community networks more or less complement the work of ISPs. But yeah, I stand to be corrected on that. And also in regard to Rashid, policy uses, is there any policy which uses, the question is not clear, sustainability of SNS in Uganda? Irene, is there any, I think that has been addressed in what Irene has presented. So I think most of these questions have been responded to. And with that, we have 1 minute to close the webinar. I know the conversation is quite timely, and we have quite a number of questions. So we would love to continue having this conversation. And Irene has responded that SN focus, that is community focus, community network focus, is still in infancy, but I'm sure it is something that we can explore and expand on, considering we've had Bosco in operation 18 years. There are ISPs in Kenya that we can leverage on, and also in South Africa, there are quite a number of models that we can adapt and try to see what best works for us. So I wish to thank all our participants for joining this webinar. I know we've quite had a number of webinars since we went into this whole lockdown with COVID-19, and we are quite honored for you to spare, your 1 hour or 2 hours to be able to join us into this conversation. But of course, I would like to extend special thanks to our our speakers, that without you probably would not have anything to share. So a big round of applause to you for joining us. Thank you so much. And this is one of our first webinars, and as a Internet Society Uganda Chapter, we are trying to go further into boosting, rural connectivity, and community networks is one of the focus that we are looking at, of course, and is also part of the mission of the Internet Society. So we will continue to have this conversation online. The recording of this is being available online. And I would like to thank all the chapter officials who have helped in this, Cliff, Sarah, and Lillian Nachom, for you to be able to make this happen. So I thank you, and I wish you all a nice afternoon, a good rest of the day for those that had to wake up very early in the morning to join this call. Thank you so much, and we look forward to future engagements with you all. Thank you. Bye.